of Mice and Men. Chapter 4, Part 2. Well, just suppose he don't come back. What'll you do then? Lenny's face wrinkled with apprehension. I don't know. Say, what you doing anyways? He cried. This ain't true. George ain't got hurt. Crooks bore in on him. Want me to tell you what'll happen? They'll take you to the booby hatch. They'll tie you up with a collar like a dog. Suddenly, Lenny's eyes centered and grew quiet and mad. He stood up and walked dangerously toward Crooks. Who hurt George? He demanded. Crooks saw the danger as it approached him. He edged back on his bunk to get out of the way. I was just supposing, he said. George ain't hurt. He's all right. He'll be back all right. Lenny stood over him. What you supposing for? Ain't nobody going to suppose no hurt to George. Crooks removed his glasses and wiped his eyes with his fingers. Just sit down, he said. George ain't hurt. Lenny growled back to his seat on the nail keg. Ain't nobody gonna talk no hurt to George, he grumbled. Crooks said gently, maybe you can see now. You got George. You know he's gonna come back. Suppose you didn't have nobody. Suppose you couldn't go into the bunkhouse and play rummy 'cause you was black. How'd you like that? Suppose you had to sit out here and read books. Sure, you could play horseshoes till it got dark, but then you gotta read books. Books ain't no good. A guy needs somebody to be near him, he whined. A guy goes nuts if he ain't got nobody. Don't make no difference who the guy is, long as he's with you. I tell you, he cried, I tell you, a guy gets too lonely and he gets sick. George gonna come back? Lenny reassured himself in a frightened voice. Maybe George come back already. Maybe I better go see. Crooks said, I didn't mean to scare you. He'll come back. I was a-talking about myself. A guy sits alone out here at night, maybe reading books or thinking or stuff like that. Sometimes he gets thinking, and he got nothing to tell him what's so and what ain't so. Maybe if he sees something, he don't know whether it's right or not. He can't turn to some other guy and ask him if he sees it too. He can't tell. He got nothing to measure by. I seen things out here. I wasn't drunk. I don't know if I was asleep. If some guy was with me, he could tell me I was asleep, and then it would be all right. But I just don't know. Crooks was looking across the room now, toward the window. Lenny said miserably, George won't go away and leave me. I know George won't do that. The stable buck went on dreamily. I remember when I was a little kid on my old man's chicken ranch. Had 2 brothers. They was always near me, always there. Used to sleep right in the same room, right in the same bed, all 3. Had a strawberry patch. Had an alfalfa patch. Used to turn the chickens out in the alfalfa on a Sunday morning. My brothers had sat on a fence rail and watched 'em. White chickens they was. Gradually, Lenny's interest came around to what was being said. George says we're going to have alfalfa for the rabbits. What rabbits? We're going to have rabbits and a berry patch. You're nuts. You are too. You ask George. You're nuts. Crooks was scornful. I seen hundreds of men come by on the road and on the ranches with their bindles on their back and that same darn thing in their heads. Hundreds of them. They come and they quit and go on. And every darn one of them's got a little piece of land in his head. And never a darn one of them ever gets it. Just like heaven. Everybody wants a little piece of land. I read plenty of books out here. Nobody never gets to heaven, and nobody never gets no land. It's just in their head. They're all the time talking about it, but it's just in their head. He paused and looked toward the open door, for the horses were moving restlessly and the halter chains clinked. A horse whinnied. I guess somebody's out there, Crook said. Maybe Slim. Slim comes in sometimes 2-3 times a night. Slim's a real skinner. He looks out for his team. He pulled himself painfully upright and moved toward the door. That you, Slim? He called. Candy's voice answered. Slim went into town. Say, you seen Lenny? You mean the big guy? Yeah, seen him around any place? He's in here, Crook said shortly. He went back to his bunk and lay down. Candy stood in the doorway, scratching his bald wrist and looking blindly into the lighted room. He made no attempt to enter. Tell you what, Lenny, I've been figuring out about them rabbits. Crook said irritably, you can come in if you want. Candy seemed embarrassed. I don't know. Of course, if you want me to. Come on in. If everybody's coming in, you might just as well. It was difficult for Crooks to conceal his pleasure with anger. Candy came in, but he was still embarrassed. You got a nice, cozy little place in here, he said to Crooks. Must be nice to have a room all to yourself this way. Sure, said Crooks. And a manure pile under the window. Sure, it's swell. Lenny broke in. You said about them rabbits. Candy leaned against the wall beside the broken collar while he scratched the wrist stump. I've been here a long time, he said. And Crook's been here a long time. This is the first time I ever been in his room. Crooks said darkly, guys don't come into a colored man's room very much. Nobody been here but Slim. Slim and the boss. Candy quickly changed the subject. Slim's as good a skinner as I ever seen. Lenny leaned toward the old swamper. About them rabbits, he insisted. Candy smiled. I got it figured out. We can make some money on them rabbits if we go about it right. Lenny broke in, but I get to tend 'em. George says I get to tend 'em. He promised. Crooks interrupted brutally. You guys is just kidding yourself. You'll talk about it a heck of a lot, but you won't get no land. You'll be a swamper here till they take you out in a box. Heck, I seen too many guys. Lenny here'll quit and be on the road in 2-3 weeks. Seems like every guy got land in his head. Candy rubbed his cheek angrily. You're darn right we're gonna do it. George says we are. We got the money right now. Yeah, said Crooks. And where's George now? In town in a whorehouse. That's where your money's going. Good grief. I've seen it happen too many times. I seen too many guys with land in their head. They never get none under their hand. Candy cried. Sure they all want it. Everybody wants a little bit of land, not much. Just something that was his. Something he could live on, and there couldn't nobody throw him off of it. I never had none. I planted crops for darn near everybody in this state, but they wasn't my crops. And when I harvested them, it wasn't none of my harvest. But we gonna do it now, and don't you make no mistake about that. George ain't got the money in town. That money's in the bank. Me and Lenny and George, we gonna have a room to ourselves. We're gonna have a dog and rabbits and chickens. We're gonna have green corn and maybe a cow or a goat. He stopped, overwhelmed with his picture. Crooks asked, you say you got the money? Darn right. We got most of it. Just a little bit more to get. Have it all in 1 month. George got the land all picked out, too. Crooks reached around and explored his spine with his hand. "I never seen a guy really do it," he said. "I seen guys nearly crazy with loneliness for land, but every time a whorehouse or a blackjack game took what it takes." He hesitated. "If you guys would want a hand to work for nothing, just as keep, why, I'd come and lend a hand. I ain't so crippled I can't work like an SOB if I want to." "Any of you boys sing Curly?" They swung their heads toward the door. Looking in was Curly's wife. Her face was heavily made up. Her lips were slightly parted. She breathed strongly as though she had been running. "Curly ain't been here," Candy said sourly. She stood still in the doorway, smiling a little at them, rubbing the nails of one hand with the thumb and forefinger of the other. And her eyes traveled from one face to another. "They left all the weak ones here," she said finally. "Think I don't know where they all went? Even Curly. I know where they all went." Lenny watched her, fascinated. But Candy and Crooks was scowling down away from her eyes. Candy said, "Then if you know, why you want to ask us where Curly is at?" She regarded them amusedly. "Funny thing," she said. "If I catch any one man and he's alone, I get along fine with him. But just let two of the guys get together and you won't talk. Just nothing but mad." She dropped her fingers and put her hands on her hips. "You're all scared of each other, that's what. Every one of you scared the rest is going to get something on you." After a pause, Crooks said, "Maybe you better go along to your own house now. We don't want no trouble." "Well, I ain't giving you no trouble. Think I don't like to talk to somebody every once in a while? Think I like to stick in that house all the time?" Candy laid the stump of his wrist on his knee and rubbed it gently with his hand. He said accusingly, "You got a husband. You got no call fooling around with other guys causing trouble." The girl flared up. "Sure I got a husband. You all seen him. Swell guy, ain't he? Spends all his time saying what he's gonna do to guys she don't like. And he don't like nobody. Think I'm gonna stay in that 2x4 house and listen to how Curly's gonna lead with his left twice it and then bring in the old right cross? 1-2, he says. Just the old 1-2 and he'll go down." She paused, and her face lost its sullenness and grew interested. "Say, what happened to Curly's hand?" There was an embarrassed silence. Candy stole a look at Lenny. Then he coughed. Why, Curly got his hand caught in a machine, ma'am. Bust his hand. She watched for a moment and then she laughed. Baloney. What you think you're selling me? Curly started something he didn't finish. Caught a machine? Baloney. Why, he ain't give nobody the good old 1-2 since he got his hand bust. Who bust him? Candy repeated sullenly. Got it caught in a machine. All right, she said contemptuously. All right, cover 'em up if you wanna. What do I care? You bindlebums think you're so darn good. What do you think I am, a kid? I tell you, I could have went with shows. Not just one, neither. And a guy told me he could put me in pictures. She was breathless with indignation. Saturday night. Everybody out doing something. Everybody. And what am I doing? Standing here talking to a bunch of bindle stiffs. A black guy and a dum-dum and a lousy old sheep. And liking it because they ain't nobody else.